I'm Dr. Greg Ellis, and we're going to have part 2 now of protein needs. Now, one of the most important things to understand is your protein needs will vary as a function of your calorie needs. So if you're following a restricted diet where your calories are reduced, you probably need some more protein to maintain your muscle mass. If you're consuming a lot of excess calories, then a lot of that protein will be converted into carbohydrate and stored as body fat eventually. So how much do we really need? There were some interesting studies done in Europe, and experimenters looked at people consuming, in a general weight training program, 1.4 grams per kilogram of body weight. That's not a lean body mass, that's a body weight. And another group at 2.8 grams per kilogram. Turned out that the guys consuming 2.8 grams added 4 more pounds of muscle to their body than did the individuals who were weight training consuming only 1.8 grams. I'm sorry, 1.4 grams. So there's some good evidence. Now the Russians did some studies where they ran the protein intake up to 3 and 4 grams per kilogram, and got very, very good results with that, with significantly increased amounts of muscle mass. Now, endurance athletes need increased protein too, but it appears that resistance exercise is more demanding and is useful in building muscle, so more protein will help there. And I always found that high levels of protein intake were really quite good, and I did. Obviously, I took a lot of protein. So that gives you a pretty good answer on where we are in the kind of ranges. I think the consumption of at least 2.2 grams per kilogram would be the ideal for everyone. I think that would stimulate immune system function and other functions of health. And if you're following the carbohydrate restricted diet, which is going to be high in animal products, it's not going to be that difficult to get a lot of extra protein in your diet because you'll be consuming a lot of meat. And that's the way I suggest you get it. Now, in the sled dog studies done by Dr. David Kronfeld at the University of Pennsylvania's Veterinary School, he put racing sled dogs on very high levels of protein and reduced their carbohydrate intake to see what would happen to their performance. And it turned out if he didn't maintain the protein level at least 32% of total calories, they had problems in their muscles with a condition called the tying up disease. And as he gradually reduced the carbohydrate consumption from about 15% of total calories down to half that and then down to 0, that the performance dramatically increased at the 0% carbohydrate. Now this is something that a lot of people find awfully hard to believe because they argue the importance of glucose or carbohydrate in endurance performance. And as I've been trying to explain, that's just simply not true. It's just all mythology. And it's perpetrated constantly by people. And they oversubscribe to the so-called importance of glucose and carbohydrate. You see it all the time in the comments here on my videos. And people are just adamant about the fact that they think they need more glucose. One commenter said something about wanting to gain weight, and he was told by someone that he needed to eat a high glycemic index carbohydrate so he could pump up his glucose levels. Well, as I've stated over and over and over again, the metabolic pathways for using ketones, which are a byproduct of, not a byproduct, they're part of fat metabolism, a very important part, and glucose, these metabolic pathways are entirely different. When one is operating, the other is shut down or slowed. Conversely, if it goes up for the one, then the other one goes down. So you can't be doing both of these at the same time. You're not going to be able to process carbohydrates as glucose and form ketones. In fact, ketones won't even form when you get to a certain level of your carbohydrate intake. They just, because the insulin secreted by the pancreas in response to the glucose is shut down fat release from the fat cell, and that's where the ketones come from. Now, it's been argued for years and years and years that protein will damage your liver and kidneys, and there's absolutely no evidence of that whatsoever, that that is the case. In one study, the researcher fed animals with a loss of function in their kidneys of 75%. They only had 25% normal function, and he fed them 156% of their total daily calories as protein. That's a lot. And then another group 27, and another group 19. Now, after 4 years, there was absolutely no difference or change in kidney function between any of the groups of animals. So protein clearly did not lead to any further deterioration in kidney function as is believed. So this is another one of those myths that is perpetrated and is used, obviously, as a reason not to do a carbohydrate-restricted diet. And the establishment and the people who want to prevent us from following a carbohydrate-restricted diet will tell this and repeat this story over and over and over again with no facts to verify it at all. So they don't deal with facts. They ignore the facts. And that's why you get bombarded with misinformation constantly. So that's a pretty good setup on the protein needs of different individuals. And I would push for a little higher intake, but of course I push for the carbohydrate-restricted diet, so you will get a higher intake because you'll be consuming a lot of meat. And plant-based diets and meal plans don't have much protein in them at all, because most plant matter has very little protein in it. Your beans and things like that, for example, are only 12% protein, so you're not getting much protein there. So those who argue for a plant-based diet are making a severe mistake. And I saw in one of my videos a lot of comments from people describing how we can be successful in plant-based diets and how populations who live on plant-based diets are. And as I pointed out in Dr. Huntington's book, Mainsprings of Civilization, he studied all these different people living in plant-based diets, and they were terribly unhealthy. Terribly unhealthy. They were short, weighed less, had more disease. So I don't know where people were picking up their information, but they sure aren't getting it from very reputable sources. And then they just spread it. They spread it out. And of course, we're still suffering from this notion that fat and cholesterol are bad for us, when that's not true. And we know because of the glycation theory of aging and disease that it's really glucose from carbohydrates that's doing us in. So I don't know when people are going to wake up to that. I think it's going to be a long time coming. But as you age and the degenerative diseases come on, and you age more and more because of glucose pounding away at all the cells and tissues of your body, you'll be paying a price for your belief in plant-based diets and other so-called healthful diets recommended by our experts. Okay, I'm Dr. Greg Ellis.